The first try isn't always the best try, and to prove it, look no further than these cover versions of songs that have all but eclipsed the original recording. You'd be forgiven if you thought the 1968 Jimi Hendrix version of All Along the Watchtower was the first to be released. It's a performance that showcases his unprecedented guitar abilities, his perfect affinity with the psychedelic movement of the 1960s, and his singularly charismatic vocals. But the song was originally written and recorded by Bob Dylan, in a much different form for his 8th album, John Wesley Harding. Ultimate Classic Rock notes that Hendrix, a huge Dylan fan, managed to get hold of a copy of John Wesley Harding before it was widely available. As a result, Hendrix was in the studio recording his classic cover just 2 months after Dylan had recorded the original. Imbuing the song with a new sense of power and swagger, Hendrix's version outperformed Dylan's by charting at number 20. Dylan's take failed to chart at all. Dylan has been effusive in his admiration for Hendrix's cover, telling the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel in 1995 that it overwhelmed him, admitting that Hendrix had probably improved on the original. Dylan's appreciation for Hendrix's reworking is palpable in his live shows, and the performer confessed, "I took license with the song from his version, actually, and continue to do it to this day." In the liner notes to his 1985 retrospective box set Biograph, Dylan wrote about the experience of following Hendrix's lead, stating, "Strange how when I sing it, I always feel it's a tribute to him in some kind of way." Few songs by the British punk group The Clash are as radio-friendly as I Fought the Law. The 1979 recording reflects the group's anti-authoritarian stance and carries on the torch of straightforward, old-fashioned rock and roll, something many punk acts aim to do in response to the bloat of 70s anthem rock.
As they all listen to mostly music, you know, and that's what we're doing is we're here to alleviate that.
But the song's tribute to the rock of yesteryear went beyond just the sound. It's that it's a cover of a 1960 track by Buddy Holly's clean-cut backup band, the Crickets. In the wake of Holly leaving the band in 1959, the Crickets decided to bravely rock on without their band leader. In 1960, they released their first record without Holly, In Style with the Crickets. The album was a moderate success, but the Financial Times notes that I Fought the Law, penned by newly recruited Cricket Sonny Curtis, reportedly in less than half an hour, was considered little more than an obscure album track for years. That is, until it was finally covered by the Bobby Fuller 4, whose version became a top 10 hit in 1966. It was Fuller's version that the Clash heard on the jukebox of a studio in San Francisco, and the band immediately turned their attention toward recording a live version, which gained them name recognition in the United States. It's hard to hear the words twist and shout without the image of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr collectively shaking their mop tops. The Beatles version, first released on their debut British studio album Please Please Me in 1963, gained its raucous energy through a series of happy accidents. According to AllMusic, Twist and Shout was the last song the band recorded at the end of a marathon session in which they recorded 10 of their debut album's 14 tracks. By that point, Lennon's throat was so shredded that he could only perform his lead part in the gravel-voiced manner that made the final record, and he was apparently unable to complete a second take. Creative decisions around the record were apparently made just minutes before the recording started, and the track was pulled together almost instinctively. Twist and Shout eventually charted at number 2 in the UK later that year. However, Twist and Shout was recorded twice by other artists before the Beatles made their definitive version. Written by Burt Burns and Phil Medley and originally titled Shake It Up Baby, it was first put to wax with a Latin swing by the Top Notes in 1961. The single was produced by Phil Spector, who, by coincidence, would go on to produce the Beatles. But it wasn't a success, and it bears few of the hallmarks of the song as it's remembered today. The Beatles version was closely modeled on an earlier single by the Isley Brothers, who in 1962 had added the song's infectious woos. One of the most memorable music videos of the 1990s is also one of the simplest. Just a close-up of Irish singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor's face. As she sings into the camera, she eventually breaks into genuine tears. Nothing Compares to You was originally written by Prince in 1985 for a band known as The Family, which was signed to his Paisley Park record label. In truth, though, the video for O'Connor's 1990 version is even more historic than audio recording, revealing for those who couldn't hear it in her voice how truly she connected with the song's themes. O'Connor's mother died while the singer was still a teenager, and as she wrote in her autobiography, Rememberings, "My cover of Prince's Nothing Compares to You was something I was always, and am always, singing to my mother." Such genuine emotional connection helped transform an otherwise unloved album track into an international smash. The Guardian reports that the family's Paul Peterson claimed that Prince was jealous of O'Connor's version, which outperformed all of his releases in the UK by spending 4 weeks at the top of the singles chart. It also challenged the singer's career thus far in the American market, performing better than all of his singles other than When Doves Cry. Though he later released his own version under his own name, the Purple One could never soar to the emotional heights of O'Connor's performance.
Yeah. Did you ever actually meet Prince?
We did meet once, but we didn't get on very well. We tried to beat each other up.
In her tragically short career, English singer Amy Winehouse established herself as a hugely talented soul and R&B songwriter. But the London native was also an exceptional interpreter of other people's songs. This was immediately apparent on her debut album 2003's Frank, which included stellar renditions of two jazz classics, Eddie Jefferson's Moody's Mood for Love and There Is No Greater Love, written by Isham Jones and Marty Symes. And as People notes, in live sessions, Winehouse cast her net wider, covering everyone from the Rolling Stones to the Specials. But Winehouse's finest cover came as a feature artist, when she provided guest vocals on Mick Ronson's version of Valerie, a cover of a 2006 single by Liverpool indie rockers the Zootons. Though the single was a top 10 hit for the group on release, Winehouse's version got to number 2 the following year, becoming one of her signature songs. Songwriter Dave McCabe told the Manchester Evening News in 2019, "It's the biggest compliment in the world to have Amy Winehouse cover your song and for it to become massive. She was an unbelievable talent. Some people have said to us, 'Oh, but they stole your song.' The honest answer is, I love it. Amy absolutely nailed it." Countless punk and new wave bands formed and broke up in the 1960s and 1970s with just a single release to their name, nevertheless going down in the annals of alternative music history for coming out with a bona fide classic. One of these bands was The Nerves, a trio formed in Los Angeles in 1975 whose self-titled EP, released the following year, was their only official release before they eventually parted ways in 1978, according to AllMusic. The Independent reports that Nerves songwriter Jack Lee remembered that at the time of the band's split, he was living at the point of poverty, with his utilities, including the telephone, due to be cut off. Then a call came in from Blondie singer Debbie Harry requesting to cover the band's best song, Hanging on the Telephone. It proved to be a financial lifeline that helped Lee pursue a solo career under his own name. The Guardian argues that it is Debbie Harry's forceful vocal performance and the louder, brighter, brasher, and tougher production of the Blondie cover that made their version eclipse the original and become one of the band's biggest hits. In 1956, a little-known singer-songwriter named Jay Hawkins was grappling with a difficult song, a forlorn love ballad he had written and recorded the year before that just didn't seem to work. According to Gaslight Records, Hawkins returned to the studio, eager to record a new take of I Put a Spell on You, only this time he was drunk to the point of later being unable to recall the session. Rather than play it safe, Hawkins delivered an incendiary performance of grunts, snarls, and howls, which earned him a new moniker, Screamin' Jay Hawkins. Though the single failed to chart, it would go down as a classic, and it was covered by a bevy of artists from Creedence Clearwater Revival to Annie Lennox, with varying degrees of commercial success. The musician who has become most closely associated with Hawkins' song, however, is Nina Simone, who recorded a version for her 1965 album of the same name. Simone's version replaces Hawkins' monstrous ravings and brash horns with a simmering vocal performance and sultry strings, becoming as seductive as the song's title implies. So closely did the singer associate the song with her public persona that she also recycled the title for her autobiography. David Bowie was just 19 when he wrote the title track for his third solo album, The Man Who Sold the World, released in 1970. It sank like a stone on its first release, as did the album, and only became a success years later as the B-side to Bowie's hit single Life on Mars. The song's cult status was solidified, however, in 1993 when Nirvana covered the track as part of their acclaimed MTV Unplugged set, which was released as a live album the following year, 6 months after frontman Kurt Cobain's untimely death. As classic rock history notes, the set included numerous successful covers, with songs by the Vaselines and blues pioneer Leadbelly, but it was the reworking of the underappreciated Bowie classic that really stole the show. Bowie spoke highly of Nirvana's version, telling a Dutch interviewer in 1996,
"It really had two mystical states, the time that I wrote it and recorded it, and the time when he wrote it again."
There aren't many #1 smash hits that are played in the time signature of a waltz, but then again, almost everything about the Animals' 1964 classic House of the Rising Sun is unusual. For instance, it was recorded in just one take, according to Ultimate Classic Rock. The song's producer, Mickey Most, initially hated it, but was so convinced by the band's studio performance that he insisted the recording didn't require a single edit. House of the Rising Sun proved to be a major phenomenon in popular music. It's even said to be the song that convinced acoustic purist Bob Dylan that he should finally go electric, and perhaps integral to the song's influence on Dylan was the fact that it wasn't an original, but a traditional folk song first recorded by Clarence Tom Ashley and Gwen Foster all the way back in 1933. It may be debatable whether a take on a folk song strictly counts as a cover. Those songs in a way belong to everyone. Ashley claimed he had first learned the song from his grandfather. But in any case, the Animals recorded the definitive version, which remains a karaoke and open mic mainstay to this day. Musicians often have mixed feelings about others covering their songs, something 9 Inch Nails' Trent Reznor openly admitted in a 2008 interview. He told The Sun that his first reaction upon hearing Johnny Cash's 2002 version of his 1995 track Hurt was similar to witnessing someone, quote, kissing my girlfriend. The Financial Times notes that Reznor's original was written as a deeply personal portrait of his own depression.
What I was going through around the writing of Downward Spiral was not knowing who I was anymore.
The song's universal theme of suffering makes it prime material for a cover artist, especially one of Cash's stature. Cash's version was released alongside a music video that didn't hide the veteran musician's age and frailty. It gave the song greater resonance and reportedly brought Reznor to tears when he first watched it. Reznor later explained what Cash's cover came to mean to him, saying, "Having Johnny Cash, one of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time, want to cover your song? That's something that matters to me." He said afterwards it was a song that sounds like one he would have written in the 60s, and that's wonderful. It's doubtful that Dolly Parton could have envisioned what a seismic song I Will Always Love You would eventually become when she wrote it in 1973. According to Entertainment Weekly, the track was originally a heartfelt farewell to her creative partner, Porter Wagoner. It became one of the highlights of Parton's album Jolene, which hit number 6 on the Hot Country chart. Its real impact would only be felt 2 decades later, when Whitney Houston recorded it for the 1992 movie The Bodyguard, in which Houston also starred. Imbuing the song with incredible vocal dexterity and power, Houston spent a record 14 weeks at the top of the Billboard chart, making I Will Always Love You into one of the best-selling singles of all time, according to Vibe. In January 2022, 30 years after the world-beating single was first released, Houston's version of I Will Always Love You was officially certified Diamond by the Recording Industry Association of America, just as the movie's full soundtrack had been. The song's sales and streams exceeded 10 million, the late singer's 4th release to achieve that honor. There are thought to be more than 300 versions of Leonard Cohen's mournful ballad Hallelujah. The song took him 5 years to write and was not greeted with great enthusiasm by either his record label or the listening public on its first release in 1984. Today, the song is everywhere, in countless movies and TV shows, as well as serving as material for countless talent show contestants over the years. However, there is one version of Hallelujah that can be said to have single-handedly turned the song's fortunes around, the 1994 recording by Jeff Buckley. It's one of the high points of Grace, the only studio album Buckley released in his brief lifetime. According to USA Today, Buckley first heard the song as covered by ex-Velvet Underground musician John Cale on a record he found while cat-sitting in a friend's New York apartment. He immediately saw new possibilities in the track and reworked it into the form by which it is best known. Glenn Hansard, a close friend of Buckley's who used to live with him in New York, explained the emotional investment that Buckley made in his performance of Cohen's song, telling The Atlantic, "He gave us the version we hoped Leonard would emote, and he wasn't afraid to sing it with absolute reverence. Jeff sang it back to Leonard as a love song to what he achieved, and in doing so, Jeff made it his own." Tainted Love, with its infectious 4-part harmony, was first put to wax by Gloria Jones in 1964. A catchy, stomping northern soul romp, the song was only initially released as a B-side and received little airplay amid a disappointing commercial performance, according to You Discover Music, but it would later be remembered as a masterpiece of the genre, thanks to a cover nearly 20 years later. In 1981, the song took on a very different energy, thanks to a cover by the British synth-pop duo Soft Cell. The Guardian reports that the band's synth player, Dave Ball, first heard Jones's version from northern soul parties held in his hometown of Blackpool, England. Singer Mark Almond was an admirer of Jones after seeing her perform with glam rockers T-Rex.
"No one ever told me that it was a hit over there. I never knew."
Looking to smooth out their strange anti-consumerist meanderings with a couple of covers, Soft Cell settled on Tainted Love. Little did they know that the song would go to number 1 in 17 countries and become an all-time synth-pop classic. In 1968, and in one of their earliest incarnations, long before their chart-topping success of Rumors, Fleetwood Mac was looking for a hit. Thanks to a song written by founding member Peter Green, they got a modest one, Black Magic Woman, a blues rock workout that climbed to number 37 on the UK album charts. Rolling Stone reports that it remained a staple of the band's live performances long after Green's departure. 2 years later, Santana put its spin on the original, infusing it with Latin rhythms and a new climactic ending thanks to a switch in the final bars to Gypsy Queen, an instrumental track written by Hungarian jazz guitarist Gabor Szabo. The song was a huge hit for the band, peaking at number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and staying on the charts for a total of 13 weeks. The album it's on, Abracus, spent 6 weeks at the top of the album charts, and was later inducted into the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress. In 1998, both Santana and Fleetwood Mac were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. With members of both bands attending the ceremony, Green joined Santana on stage for a celebratory rendition of the era-defining song. It's Oh So Quiet was Icelandic singer Björk's biggest hit to date when it was released to great acclaim in 1994. It hit number 4 in the UK in 1995, where it sold more than 400,000 copies according to official charts. The song is playful, unpredictable, and strange, all hallmarks of Björk's discography. You knew that the song is a cover of an equally playful novelty song released by the American singer Betty Hutton way back in 1951. By drawing an even greater contrast between both the sonic textures and tempo of the song's two parts, Björk's version manages to inject the track with even more manic energy. This is topped by her incredible vocal range, switching between sweetly seductive whispers and genuinely ear-splitting screams. The song provided a safe entry point to her sophomore album Post, which, as a departure from her generally accessible debut, opened with grinding electronica in the form of Army of Me. According to The Guardian, It's Oh So Quiet made Björk a household name around the world. The recording history of the song The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore, originally written by the Four Seasons songwriting duo Bob Gaudio and Bob Crew, is a perfect example. According to You Discover Music, the pair originally envisioned the song in the hands of another duo, the Righteous Brothers, but it was claimed by the Four Seasons' Frankie Valli, who at the time was casting around for a suitable solo debut. Though his performance on the song is admirable, the release was not a success. Its writers later speculated that the Four Seasons record label may have limited distribution of the song to ruin Valli's solo efforts and keep him tied to the group. Within the space of a few months, the song was picked up by the Walker Brothers, whose version eclipsed Valli's original in terms of its soaring power and, as it turned out, commercial performance. A disappointed Gaudio later said, "The Walker Brothers released it with a similar arrangement, but a faster tempo, and that was number 1 in England. I thought it was fabulous, but I preferred it at our tempo." The Walker single also performed well in the US, hitting a respectable number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 to become an enduring classic, which in turn has been covered by countless artists since. Mark E. Smith of the long-running Manchester-based art punk group The Fall was, throughout his 40-year career, a hugely prolific songwriter with hundreds of credits to his name.
What I have is a very original approach to writing, you see, because it's not educated, but it's not jargonized, I don't think.
He was also somewhat unpredictable when it came to covering other artists, with inspiration often coming from unexpected sources. As noted by Brooklyn Vegan, Smith had a penchant for delivering skewed versions of classic soul, disco, and country tunes, such as Sister Sledge's Lost in Music and Wanda Jackson's Funnel of Love. Elsewhere, he delved into obscure garage and rockabilly to uncover gems that suited The Fall's template perfectly. One of those was The Fall's much-loved version of Mr. Pharmacist, a cover of the generally unknown 1966 single by The Other Half. Smith's group included it in their 1986 album Ben Sinister. His caustic delivery ramps up the energy in The Fall's version, and Smith seemed unusually happy with how the song fit his group's overall aesthetic. The Guardian notes that the song bucked The Fall's policy to perform predominantly new music during live shows by remaining a regular fixture of their set list right up until Smith's final live appearances in 2017. Joni Mitchell first wrote Both Sides Now in 1967, a year or two before becoming the prolific singer-songwriter she became. The song was first recorded by Judy Collins, whose rendition hit number 3 on the US Billboard charts that same year. That's still arguably the most well-known version of the song, with its rose-tinted keyboard line, sweeping strings, and bright vocals. However, Mitchell never approved of Collins' version. She said in David Yaffe's biography of her reckless daughter, "She sounds like the damsel in the green room. There's something la-di-da about her." Just 2 years later, Mitchell released her own version on her sophomore album Clouds. She brought the key down to F sharp and stripped the arrangement down to just her and her guitar. Mitchell's somber, more reflective cover, if you can even call it that, ranked 171 on Rolling Stone's 2004 500 Greatest Songs of All Time list, perhaps as a way of paying respect to the original vision. That said, even Mitchell knew the song could have many interpretations. In 2000, Mitchell once again recorded the song for a new album of the same name, in which she completely transformed it with a rubato vocal and an orchestra of strings and horns. In 2024, she performed the song live at the Grammys in a similarly virtuosic arrangement that earned her a standing ovation. Al Green released the original version of Take Me to the River on 1974's Al Green Explores Your Mind, an album that, while successful, didn't chart as well as earlier records. Green soon faded into a period of relative obscurity after becoming a minister and dedicating himself to religious music. This left room for the Talking Heads, whose founding members David Byrne and Chris Frantz were fans of Green's music, to reinvent the song for their fan base. Byrne did not want to release a cover at first, believing it would outshine his original songs. However, the song was so popular at their live shows that it felt wrong not to include it on on their second album, 1978's More Songs About Buildings and Food. Though their live performances of the track were unusually upbeat, they decided to slow it down for the recording, accentuating its funky groove with more modern production. The song was their first to make Billboard's top 30, but their most well-known performance of the work is still the live version captured in their 1984 concert film Stop Making Sense. It's a rapturous finale that has the audience fully entranced in Byrne's near-possessed levels of infectious energy. Paste magazine wrote of the Talking Heads version, "There's something to be said about four skinny white kids from New York finding deep wells of soul and emotion that the Reverend Al Green somehow missed." Creedence Clearwater Revival had their first major mainstream success with Proud Mary when it hit number 2 on the Billboard 100 in 1969. Mixing roots music into a bluesy rock hit, the song has been a CCR staple ever since.
It was so good, I knew that it was a classic.
But just 2 years later, Ike and Tina Turner rolled on the same river to number 4 on the same charts with their bombastic cover, which some deem definitive. American Songwriter argues CCR's original version might have outperformed the Turners on the charts, but the ferocity with which Tina Turner adopted the track as her own is inarguable. It's true that Tina's vocals alone make the track her own, giving grit and soul to a song about the working man's salvation. However, it's the second half's gospel, brass-fueled energy that transforms the song into an anthem of perseverance. After splitting from Ike, Tina Turner maintained Proud Mary as one of her signature songs. She re-recorded it solo in 1993 and has performed it live numerous times, including with songwriter John Fogerty himself in 2000. He gave his blessing to Tina's version and dedicated a performance of the song to her memory after she died in 2023. Respect is so associated with Aretha Franklin that most people would assume it's hers and hers alone. But it was originally recorded by Otis Redding in 1965, written about wanting respect from his lady when he came home after a long day of work. After hearing it on the radio, Aretha, with her two sisters and backup singers Carolyn and Irma Franklin, rewrote the lyrics to reflect a woman's experience. Needless to say, it made Redding's version look like a rough draft. Carolyn said in Ray Padgett's book Cover Me, the stories behind the greatest cover songs of all time, we saw it as something earthier, a woman having no problem discussing her needs. Redding's version has a strong groove, one he would claim was the best out of all his records. However, Franklin's melting pot of new elements makes it a stronger song overall. She added the chorus that spells out the title, let her sax player go off on a killer bridge, and added playful backing vocals to give the track's lyrics more dimension. Led by her brassy vocals, her version of Respect hit number 1 on the Billboard singles charts in 1967, far higher than Redding's version ever did. There are no covers as radical as Devo's deconstruction of the Rolling Stones' I Can't Get No Satisfaction, and even fewer as formative to a band's success. An experimental performance art group based in Ohio, Devo had yet to break into the big leagues when they first started tinkering with the Stones' hit song as part of their live set. Then they released it as a single leading up to their debut album, and accompanied by a hit music video and a smash SNL performance, it rocketed them into stardom. This, of course, couldn't have happened without Mick Jagger's approval, which he resoundingly granted after hearing it for the first time. Devo co-founder Gerald Casale described Jagger's reaction in an interview with The New Yorker, saying, "He suddenly stood up and started dancing, saying, 'I like it, I like it.'"
We love that song. Jagger even said it was his favorite version of the song when he heard it.
This might come as a surprise given that Devo's cover is basically unrecognizable. It drops Keith Richards' classic guitar riff, incorporating its own guitar and bass lines while cranking up the tempo with a displacing drum pattern. If that weren't enough, lead singer Mark Motherbaugh's stuttering, janky vocals totally transform the song, yet also elevate its deceptively disillusioned lyrics about commercialism and fame. Treble ranks the cover among the best ever, writing, "Devo's mechanistic assembly line construction of the rock and roll standard pulls off the weird trick of sharpening every corner and removing the human soul while maintaining a groove." Gary Jules and Michael Andrews' stripped-down cover of Tears for Fears' Mad World is often more recognizable, despite being a far cry from the original. Tears for Fears' first successful single on the international chart, Mad World is a darkly dreamlike synth-pop track that expressed the teenage angst of the band's frontmen, Kurt Smith and Roland Ozerbal. Though its themes dealt heavily with the duo's depression while growing up fatherless, its infectious beat made it an effective dance earworm. Nearly 2 decades later, composer Michael Andrews incorporated a cover of Mad World into the somber finale of the cult classic film Donnie Darko. Teaming up with prior bandmates and vocalist Gary Jules, Andrews rearranged the song for just voice, piano, cello, and vocoder. The result is a far more melancholic recording that imbues the lyrics with explicit sadness and vulnerability, in large part thanks to Jules' more restrained vocals. The cult success of Donnie Darko prompted an official release of Andrews and Jules' Mad World as a single. It landed at number 1 on the British charts in 2003, higher than the original did in 1982. Orzabal told The Guardian in 2013, "That was probably the proudest moment of my career. I thought, thank God for the 19-year-old Roland Orzabal. Thank God he got depressed." Just as the Fab Four covered other artists, thousands have attempted to put their own spin on the Beatles catalog. You can probably count on one hand how many covers are even comparable to the original recording, let alone better. But Slate counts one cover as topping the original, writing, "Stevie Wonder in his cover of We Can Work It Out is not only the best Beatles cover of all time, but the only one that is definitively better than the Beatles' original. Even the most ardent Beatlemaniac would be hard-pressed to argue." The Wonder's 1970 version never charted quite as high. It did earn him a Grammy nomination, and he has since performed it live several times, including at events honoring Paul McCartney and the Beatles on 3 separate occasions. The original song was written by McCartney and John Lennon, whose contrasting lyrical styles and acoustic arrangement made for a catchy but somewhat conflicted song. Wonder, on the other hand, cranks up the funk and infuses We Can Work It Out with a joyous energy that makes its call for reconciliation resonate beyond the original recording. Stephen Colbert even contended that Wonder's recording is the best Beatles cover to Paul McCartney's face.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah,